Welcome to the True Assassins podcast. You know we're all about those cloak and dagger stories, and we've got a really cool one for you today. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, this one's a little different, kind of bends the mind a bit. We're going to take some serious what-ifs and see where they lead us.
Exactly. We're riffing off this book, True Kill, by Orlando Madsbrine. And he takes these historical figures, Marie Curie and Johannes Gutenberg, and flips their stories on their heads, turns them into, well, assassins.
But it's not just some random, let's make them killers thing. It's really thought-provoking. It makes you think about the impact of scientific discoveries, how easily they can be twisted, how knowledge itself can be a weapon.
So, ready to dive in. First up, we've got Marie Curie, the glowing avenger, as Madsbrine calls her. And it starts with this incredible irony, right? I mean, she discovers radium, this element with the potential to revolutionize medicine, to heal.
And it does. I mean, you think about the early uses of radiation in treating cancer. It was groundbreaking. But those same properties, that same energy, it has a dark side, a really dark side.
And that's what she comes face to face with, especially during wartime. The potential for radium to become a weapon, a source of unimaginable destruction.
And it's that realization that really drives her in this reimagining. It's not about personal gain or power. It's this deep ethical concern, this horror at the thought of science being used for such horrific purposes.
Like, she's seen what it can do, maybe even firsthand, and it's shaken her to her core. So what does she do? She takes matters into her own hands. Becomes this glowing avenger.
Right, and her first target is interesting, a German scientist. But the method is what really gets you. She uses radiation poisoning, but it's disguised to look like some rare exotic disease.
So doctors are baffled. They can't figure it out, and that's part of the plan, isn't it? It's not just about taking out one person. It's about sending a message.
Exactly. It's like a warning shot to the entire scientific community, a way of saying, look, this stuff is dangerous. We're playing with fire here, and there are consequences.
A chilling message, for sure. And from there, she gets even more strategic with her targets. It's not just anyone involved in war or weapons development. It's specifically those with the intellect and the lack of conscience to cause real, widespread devastation.
So we're talking brilliant minds, but morally bankrupt. The kind of people who wouldn't hesitate to unleash this terrifying power on the world.
And she takes them out in these really subtle ways, right? Like a timed capsule hidden in a gifted pen. Contaminated tea at a diplomatic event.
It's all about self, about mirroring the insidious nature of radiation itself. No blood, no gore, just this quiet, invisible killer. And that adds to the mystery, the fear.
People start whispering about a curse, some unknown force connected to this new, volatile science. And all the while, Curie is wrestling with her own demons. The grief, the rage, the burden of knowing her own brilliance has unleashed this horror.
It's a heavy burden, for sure. And in the book, she ultimately comes to this devastating realization that no matter how many individuals she eliminates, she can't stop the bigger machine. The warmongering hunger of humanity, as Madsbrine puts it.
It's a bleak outlook, and it leads her to this final, tragic act. She deliberately exposes herself to a lethal dose of radiation.
It's like a final, desperate message. Not a message of violence or revenge, but a message of warning. She becomes this martyr, this living embodiment of the terrible cost of weaponized science.
And the book talks about her legacy as this really complex thing. Initially, she's hailed as a hero, a martyr for science. But later, there's this understanding that she was also a victim, consumed by her own creation.
And it's not just that, right? There's this lingering unease, this almost spectral presence in labs and research facilities. Like her sacrifice planted a seed of caution, of ethical consideration.
Right, so maybe in this twisted reality, she achieved something. Maybe her actions forced the scientific world to confront the darker side of progress, to tread a little more carefully.
Okay, so now let's switch gears. Let's talk about Johannes Gutenberg. Because in True Kill, he's not just the inventor of the printing press, he's the printer of rebellion.
And that's a brilliant concept, right? I mean, the printing press was revolutionary, it democratized knowledge. But what if it was also used to spread rebellion, to undermine the powers that be?
And that's exactly what Madsbrine explores. The printing press becomes this weapon, this tool for disseminating coded messages of resistance. And the code itself is incredibly clever, like it's hidden in the typography, the serifs, the spacing between letters.
So you've got these seemingly innocent books and pamphlets being circulated, but they contain these hidden messages for those who know how to read them.
And his first recruit is this fascinating character, Sister Agnes, a scribe who's transformed into an assassin.
Imagine that. You have this figure who is traditionally associated with copying holy texts, now embedding secret calls to action within those very texts.
Talk about turning the tables. It's this incredible act of subversion, using the tools of the establishment to dismantle it from within.
And the network expands from there. You've got traveling minstrels, printers in different towns, all working together to spread the word.
It's like this decentralized uprising, all fueled by the power of the printed word.
Mhm.
And it starts to have a real impact, particularly on the ruling class. I mean, there's panic in the courts, pamphlets exposing corruption are spreading like wildfire.
The church, which had a monopoly on knowledge for so long, is suddenly facing this wave of dissent, all thanks to the printing press.
And the book gives these really interesting examples of targeted actions. You've got a corrupt bishop who's poisoned through a communion wafer, a tyrannical duke who's taken out by a trusted servant.
So again, it's subtle, it's insidious, but it's effective. And all of this is orchestrated from Gutenberg's workshop, which becomes this hub of resistance.
But of course, it's dangerous work. Gutenberg and his network are constantly being hunted. Printers disappear, presses are destroyed. But the more they try to suppress it, the more it spreads.
It's like this wildfire they can't put out. Madsbrine calls Gutenberg an arsonist of the mind, and it's such a fitting description.
He might not have been on the front lines, spilling blood, but he was waging war nonetheless. A war of ideas, a war for the hearts and minds of the people.
And it was a long game, a war that would take generations to win. Gutenberg might not have lived to see the final victory, but he knew he'd set the wheels in motion. He'd given the people a voice, a weapon against tyranny.
And that's where the book gets really interesting when it talks about his legacy. You know, history remembers him for the printing press, for the Bible. But what if his real legacy was this underground movement, this slow-burning revolution he ignited?
It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That beneath the surface of the historical record, there's this whole other story. A story of intrigue, of rebellion, of the quiet power of the printed word.
So what do you think? Did Curie and Gutenberg achieve their goals in these reimagined scenarios? Did they change the world, even if it wasn't in the ways we traditionally think about?
It definitely makes you look at them in a new light,
Right.
right? It makes you question the easy narratives, the simple explanations, and it makes you wonder what other hidden stories are out there waiting to be unearthed.
Right. What other figures might have led these double lives, operating in the shadows to shape the course of history? It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. And it brings up some pretty huge ethical questions, too. Can we justify these kinds of actions, even if they're done for what we perceive as a greater good? What responsibility do those who create powerful tools have for how those tools are used?
Big questions, for sure. And Madsbrine's book, even though it's fictional, it really forces you to grapple with them.
Yeah, it makes you think about the ripple effects of our actions, both intended and unintended. And it reminds you that history is never as straightforward as it seems.
So there you have it. 2 historical figures, 2 reimagined lives, and a whole lot to think about. We encourage you to dig deeper into the real stories of Curie and Gutenberg and see how these fictional accounts might inform your understanding of their legacies.
Thanks for joining us for this wild ride on the True Assassins podcast. Rate and follow for more addictive Cloak and Dagger stories.
We'll see you next time.